Guys, I have a confession to make. In my last video, which you should totally go watch if you haven't, click the iCard right there, I had mentioned that I haven't watched anything from the MCU since 2020's Shang-Chi. I unfortunately have to announce that I have broken my 3-year fast from the MCU for this piece of crap right here. Why? Well, because I heard this was the new MCU.
It's the new MCU.
The show is getting hyped up as dark and gritty.
Dark, gritty.
It was gonna be a little more R-rated and violent.
I love it's a bit more R-rated, a bit more violent.
It is literally ASL.
It was American Sign Language, it was Indigenous history.
That's right, the show is ASL. They plopped Helen Keller down to flash gang signs at the camera and scream walrus mating calls, while her handlers sit just off screen, nod, and say, "Oh yes, she's such a genius when it comes to quantum mechanics." Stephen Hawking and his naked island midgets trying to write formulas on just barely too tall whiteboards can eat their hearts out. I still can't believe that's a thing, oh my gosh. Everybody was eagerly anticipating this show. Even Disney was so eager to get it out there, they shortened the episode count and dropped the whole season at once. Such confidence they had. And now it's here, and it's time to see if it in fact lives up to all the hype. The immense amount of hype. We shall see if the action is as gritty and visceral as it claims, but most importantly, is it truly ASL? Let's check the Magic 8 Ball. Yep, no, that's pretty much what I expected. But seeing as how I'm here and recording, we might as well take our little journey and talk about Echo. So the show starts with a warning that the show is in fact TVMA. It is definitely not suitable for younger audiences. I would argue that this show isn't suitable for any audience who actually likes good shows, but alas, we're not there yet. Before we get to that, we get a new opening for Marvel's latest sub-brand, or whatever they're calling it, named after an old comic book line that I haven't read much of. I think I may have read like one issue that had Morbius in it. That sounds vaguely familiar to me. Apparently, these Marvel Spotlight stories are supposed to be contained, character-driven shows that don't require you to watch anything else to understand. So, that sounds perfectly right up my alley. Let's ignore the fact that Kingpin and Daredevil are in the show and that it's a spin-off of Hawkeye, but, you know, I'm sure that won't damage the show in any way. The actual show starts now with... You know, I'm not 100% sure what this is. Some naked mud people wake up in some underground pools, drink out of the pools, which give them glowing spirals on their hands or something. Suddenly, the cave collapses for no discernible reason, but the naked mud people survive and become Native Americans. Where those clothes came from, I got no clue. And who did those tattoos? Also, Bird. Bird important. Remember that.
And that's the story of the first Choctaw people.
Not much of a story you got there, more like it's just a thing that happened. Now, I'm no expert on people, but I think generally they aren't going to have a clue at what this is supposed to be or what's going on. Like, everyone knows the Big Bang, and they're pretty familiar with the young Earth creationism idea thanks to fairly loud evangelical voices here in America. I would even say most people have enough familiarity with Greek mythology to understand the battle between the gods and the Titans if presented with no further context. But when it comes to the broader scope of the Native American culture, the layperson really only knows the hits. The Trail of Tears, Squanto, Tonto, Chief Sitting Bull, Red-Faced Geronimo, the Kansas City Chiefs, the team formerly known as the Washington Redskins, and if you're lucky, they'll know about Wendigos and Skinwalkers, West Study, and have maybe watched a couple episodes of Reservation Dogs.
Aho! Young warrior! Looks as though you've tasted the white man's lead.
And that's really only here in America. Most people across the pond don't know a single thing about Native American culture. They probably couldn't name a single thing coming out of it. And that's just the broader Native American lore. When you narrow it down to Choctaw creationism, you're going to be hard-pressed to find somebody who knows even a sliver about that, so some explanation is going to be needed other than just, here's some naked mud people, they got out of the ground and now they're normal people. And those were the first Choctaws. This specific thought niggled my mind for a while, so I decided to actually look into the Choctaw creation story to get some clarification. So prepare yourself for a detour into Choctaw lore. Now, the Choctaw Indian tribe has historically been a fairly friendly one. They were largely agricultural rather than nomadic, and they mostly got along with their European neighbors, even fighting alongside them in both the Revolutionary and the Civil Wars, and going on to become some of the first Indian code talkers during World War I. They even fought under Andrew Jackson during the famous Battle of New Orleans, the very guy who would oversee their displacement under the Indian Removal Act. A lot of them actually willingly relocated to Oklahoma and Louisiana, while those who remained in their home of Mississippi would become America's first non-European citizens. Now, that all is to say that it's entirely possible that these creation stories could have become diluted and changed as the tribe split into three and integrated into American society, which probably explains why I found some inconsistent accounts of the Choctaw views of the dawn of humanity. I'm going to attempt to combine some of these together in order to fit the narrative presented in the show. If I got anything wrong, it's mostly for the sake of storytelling, or just because I'm retarded and can't research properly. That's been an issue with me since middle school. This is Naniwaya, a cave mound that would serve as the dawn of humanity, and whose name I probably completely butchered the pronunciation of. The Supreme Creator used this as an incubator of sorts to birth the first humans who emerged from the tunnels of the mound, which would then be sealed. These people would face red and blonde-haired giants and even a worldwide flood. These stories include the idea that these tunnels lead to a whole other world beneath the Earth's crust. So we have ancient apocalypse connections and maybe Hollow Earth theory. That's kinda neat, I'm not gonna lie. I even found a source of stories that tell of ancient Choctaws trying to build a tower to the sky, but are foiled 3 different times, and on that 3rd time they start speaking different languages, which would then split them into the Choctaws and the Chickasaw tribes. There are some weird similarities to Christianity there. Anyway, where was I? Oh, right. Echo. The point of that tangent is that this needs to be explained, not only because it's some cool lore, but because most people aren't going to look at this and go, ah yes, the Naniwaya cave mound. It wouldn't hurt to add some actual explanation to this, since all of that actual mythology and lore is way more interesting than the show itself, and we're only one scene in. Plus, this is the foundational scene for what will become Echo's magical powers in this totally grounded, more character-driven show, so it would help if the audience could better understand what is going on. We then flash forward to a nice little campfire family gathering. Echo's parents hang out with the grandparents long enough to establish that Mama Echo is deaf and that Grandpa Echo struggles with sign language, kinda indicating that he's new to the family, you know, he married in. But the grandparents decide that they've had too much screen time and leave. Well, there's that bird again. I'm sure that doesn't mean anything. Baby Echo, who's been hanging out with her cousin Bonnie, wants some hot chocolate, so Mama Echo volunteers to take her on a double-deaf outing to get some. Don't know why she didn't just say, no honey, we're out, we'll have to get some tomorrow. Or why she just took Echo and not Bonnie. Like, what are Bonnie and Papa Echo supposed to do, just sit there and look at each other and twiddle their thumbs? Like, she didn't want to come too? However, the deaf duo have more pressing issues. Someone has cut their brakes, causing them to get into a car wreck. Mama Echo dies and Baby Echo gets a shard of glass through the leg, making her a DIE exec's ultimate fantasy, also known as a deaf Indian amputee. Yeah, so obviously there's a lot wrong with this scene. The first problem that jumped out to me was, of course, a woman driving? Come on now, that's pressing believability a little too much. No, but seriously, how in the world does it take this long for someone to realize the brakes have been cut? From personal experience, you apply the brakes at least 90% of the time coming out of the driveway alone. A more realistic scene would have her tapping the brakes, slowly pulling out of their driveway, lightly tapping a tree and going, huh, that was weird, someone cut the brakes. However, the more egregious part of this scene is obviously, where did this glass come from? It could have come from the windshield, I guess, except the windshield didn't break, but even if it did. That is not how windshields work, or windscreens for my folks across the pond. They aren't glass. Okay, let me illustrate this real quick. So this is my personal windshield on my car, and if you can tell, there's a giant crack going right across it. This is because a rock, I think, hit around there, but if you can tell, I can push on it without it breaking, and if you can see that just a little bit, you can see that the crack is being reflected. Right? So if this was just like normal glass, the rock would have hit and it would have just cracked, shattered, wind would have gotten right in through there, and I wouldn't be able to drive the car at all. However, because the way the car is made, it doesn't shatter easily because this isn't normal glass. Just look at some even worse windshield damage and you'll see that windshields aren't just normal panes of glass. Glass don't bend like that. You see, when windshields were introduced as a standard automobile feature in 1915, they were made of tempered glass, which was made in a process of heating that made the glass extraordinarily hard and sturdy. However, there were too many accounts of, well, this very thing happening when the glass inevitably did break, leading to multiple lawsuits, probably most notably Payne versus Ford, which was ruled in Ford's favor thanks to Payne's reckless driving. However, this served as a wake-up call for Ford, who in 1919 started standardizing windshields made with laminated glass. This process of glass making was accidentally pioneered by scientist Edward Benedictus. Damn it, I'm so immature. This process of glass making was accidentally pioneered by scientist Edward Benedictus and his assistant John C. Wood. Oh, come on.
Hey, is there a butts here? See more butts? Hey, everybody, I want to see more butts!
Okay, for real this time. This process of glass making was accidentally pioneered by scientist Edward Benedictus and his assistant John C. Wood when in 1903 Benedictus bumped his head on a shelf, knocking over a beaker. To his surprise, it broke into tiny, non-dangerous pieces thanks to the liquid plastic within hardening, which created the first instance of laminated glass. The modern windshield follows this structure. Two glass panes are laminated together with a thin layer of this liquid plastic, which prevents the glass from breaking into these giant glass shards in the event of an accident. The process started with using collodion or cellulose as this liquid sealant, but now we use polyvinyl butyrol. It is weaker than tempered glass, but from 1919 forward, the development of auto glass production prioritized the safety of the occupant over the strength of the glass. I.e., this right here is fundamentally impossible thanks to basic car safety manufacturing. This applies to every window in the car, which, while made from different processes, still cannot break like this. Now, all of this could be considered nitpicking for the sake of finding problems with the show, and to that I say, okay, maybe I went a little overboard, but the show's boring me to tears and I need to find something interesting to talk about. Also, this is definitely going to happen again, prepare yourself for that. However, that doesn't take away from the fact that this is still stupid. It's fundamentally impossible. Plus, it's just the most uninteresting order of events the show could have taken. Allow me to pitch my vision of the scene for a second. The truck gets T-boned, with both Mama Echo and Baby Echo being thrown from the vehicle. Mama Echo has landed on a roadside ditch with the truck dangling precariously above her, being held up by, I don't know, like a young fragile tree. Baby Echo has been pinned to the ground by some of the wreckage. She attempts to save her mother, irreparably damaging her own leg trying to do so, but she's too late. She has to watch her mother crushed underneath the weight of the truck. This could give an added level to the guilt Echo feels in the hospital, which in the normal events of the show is completely unfounded, while also giving her amputee status more meaning to her character rather than just being a thing that she is because reasons. What's more, this guilt could develop into resentment for her father once she learns that it was his affiliations with New York gangs that got her mom killed. This could lead her to joining Kingpin's organization in order to avenge her mother instead of what we eventually get. Now that's just my idea, it could be completely bad, I'll give you that. But the point is, there are different ways the scene could have progressed to A, make more sense, and B, add meaning to Maya's character as an amputee and orphan, perhaps helping us better understand her actions as an adult. And you know what, maybe I could have taken this scene a little more seriously if the actress expressed any emotion, like anything, instead of just going. If I was a child who got in a car wreck, got a shard of glass right through my shin, and watched my mom die, I don't know, I'd at least cry, panic, something. But alas, Baby Echo decides on that day she's going to be a stoic bitch. At least there's this one brief shot where she tries. And it's the most emotion Echo expresses in the show. For the record, I'd blame the director or the editor for this. I'm not trying to bully a child. At least not publicly. To be fair, there is the implication that Maya is feeling some sort of emotion. She does say that she blames herself for Mama Echo's death, but once again, it is pretty unfounded. You just asked for hot chocolate, but it was Mama Echo who volunteered to go to the store and take her. If anything, it would make more sense for Echo to be upset with her mother for getting herself killed and Maya maimed, which could make her heel turn into a more angry character make more sense. Maybe it could cause her to hate her hometown and heritage. Or we could just have actually had baby Echo act like a spoiled brat about the hot chocolate, which can then develop into self-hatred after her mother's death, pushing her into the arms of Kingpin in New York. I think either direction would make Maya a more three-dimensional character. Granny Echo blames Papa Echo for her daughter's death and forces him to leave Oklahoma. You know, if you were so concerned about the safety of your family because of your son-in-law, maybe you shouldn't let him run off with your adolescent granddaughter? I don't think that speaks well to who you are as a person, Granny Echo. In New York, Papa Echo dispenses some wisdom, telling Maya that she will have to learn how to jump between two worlds by observing them both. The next scene sees Papa Echo telling his daughter to focus on her studies instead of pursuing a lifestyle similar to his. However, it is shown that the world she sees is her father's criminal life. This has some interesting setup to explore how Echo only really became and remained a criminal by taking her father's lessons to heart and mimicking the world she saw. This isn't going to get revisited, is it? Also, that's Kingpin. Don't know why they wouldn't just reveal his face, but yeah, that's Kingpin right there. Alright, we're finally flash forwarding to where we're introduced to adult Echo, played by Alaqua Cox. Excuse me. But you know what? We should be grateful she took a couple days off of her Amazon warehouse job to grace us with her presence. Also, I'm pretty sure that leg qualifies as a dangerous weapon in the MMA. She could severely injure someone with that. I'm pretty sure that would earn the gym some lawsuits. We get a scene that I assume is from the Hawkeye show, which, of course, I didn't watch, where Ronan just straight murders Echo's dad. Echo gets mad about this and breaks into an auto dealership. The cops naturally show up and surround the place. This could be a good opportunity right here for Echo to demonstrate her resourcefulness in cleverly escaping officers of the law, or perhaps her recklessness in showing her trying to engage an entire squad of armed police in hand-to-hand combat. Or maybe she can demonstrate that this is a rageful rampage by screaming and hulking out on the cops. Let's see what she does. Okay, so she ties a hair tie around the throttle of a motorcycle, sending it into a cop car. Great, now what, Einstein? I guess nothing, since Kingpin has come in to personally take her out of police custody. It might just be me, but this feels wrong. The way Kingpin operated in Daredevil was as this mastermind behind the scenes, with his influence dictating the actions of people miles away, without him even having to lift a finger. The mere mention of his name struck fear into people. Plus, he likes to present himself as a philanthropist and a savior while keeping his criminal activity a secret. Which makes things weird when he's just showing up in person to drag his semi-adopted niece off while every single cop there just watches him do it. I find it very hard to believe that every single one of these guys are in his pocket, and if they were, then they should know that this very identifiable girl is close to the big man. Therefore, they really should just be leaving her be. Also, I have to ask, how in the world Kingpin got here so quickly? Echo is just now being detained. There hasn't even been enough time for the police on scene to even report Echo's description, much less enough time for Kingpin to hear about this and show up, even assuming that he's just a couple blocks over. Unless the dude's chauffeur is Dominic Toretto. Actually, it would just make more sense that this is Dom in a fat suit, since suddenly Kingpin's all about family. Fat Dom tries to connect with Echo's anger about her father's death by talking about his own father's death. I really hope this is like a manipulation tactic and not a retcon of this scene right here. Because, you know, Kingpin killed his own father? Echo didn't do that. That's not the same situation right there. For whatever reason, he really wants to offer Echo a job in the organization. Why? I have no idea, to be honest. Maybe he's just keeping crime all in the family. For Echo's first assignment, she's sent to kill some of Kingpin's rivals. We get the tired old scene where the creepy guy grabs the girl boss's butt while patting her down, and she turns around and throws him up against the wall. Like, seriously, is there any other way to do this scene? Can we just stop getting it? It's getting boring. Actually, it probably wasn't all that exciting when it first came out into cinema, but can we just please stop it now? And then we get to another part of the scene. We get a one-take action sequence that includes Daredevil facing off with Echo, and it felt incredibly cobbled together at the very last second. Because this video is going to be long enough as is, and I'm by no means a fight scene expert, I'm just going to bullet point everything wrong that I saw with this fight scene. Number 1, the fact that before the fight, Echo doesn't bother to try to read the lips of the Short King giving her instructions, and instead just looks around like she's preparing to be our next president. You would think that after 20 plus years of being deaf, you would learn to read lips somewhat, or at the very least just focusing on the person talking to you and try to understand what they're saying instead of looking around like the frickin' weed brownies just hit. Number 2, the fat guy awkwardly throws himself through the door as a tactical decision. Like seriously, do you think you're John Wick, pal?
I'm thinking I'm back.
Do you think you're Ethan Hunt? This is such a stupid decision to make, especially as your initial attack. Number 3, this guy gets shot point blank and just shrugs it off. Number 4, this man casually wielding a coffee cup for this fight. Like it's just a normal work day for him. Number 5, Echo doesn't want to kill people until she has a sexual awakening after breaking this guy's neck. Number 6, the fact that broken neck didn't overpower this young, not in shape girl. Number 7, the fact that she has the strength to snap his neck in that position at all. Number 8, the rope guard teleporting in from the front door. Number 9, Echo straight up punches Matt's truncheons without injury. Number 10, this slow-ass pirouette kick that Matt just watches happen. Or I guess he's blind, that he just senses happen. Number 11, this incredibly sloppy edit cover-up. Number 12, this. The hell is this? Number 13, the fact that Daredevil actually beats her in a fight and then just leaves without questioning her or making sure she gets arrested for murder. So yeah, the best word to describe this sequence is sloppy. It felt like the writers, directors, execs, whomever realized that no one was going to care about this show, so they threw in a fight scene with Daredevil that is one take, just like the most famous fights from the Netflix show. Here's the thing though, this sucks. It doesn't make sense, it's slow-paced, like everyone is still practicing their moves, and then it just ends abruptly with Daredevil letting the criminal go. This is the only scene with Daredevil, by the way, and he is still damaged as a character. Let's compare this to the famous hallway fight scene in Daredevil Season 1, which I just made a video about, and by just made a video, I mean probably like a couple months ago at this point. Yes, it's also stripped down and a little slow, however, there is a narrative purpose for the slow pace. Daredevil is nursing a stitched knife wound in his stomach, so he's desperately trying to take out all these Russians as quickly as he can before he collapses. None of his foes are professional martial artists, they're just street goons, so there's no need for fancy choreography, it's a street brawl, and the tension and excitement comes from Matt's physical condition declining as the fight goes on. And of course, it ends with him overpowering the odds and saving a child from being trafficked. The fight in and of itself is like a complete narrative. Matt gets the upper hand with a surprise attack. The Russian goons almost overwhelm him with sheer numbers and just general healthiness. But Matt overcomes the odds and saves the day. The fight scene in Echo is a deaf amputee flopping around for a bit and gets buried under a shelf. To be fair, it does try to tell a story with Echo's criminal awakening, but there's an issue with that as well. First, we've already seen Echo committing crimes, not to mention expressing a desire to live a criminal life from a very young age. Second, Echo killing someone for the first time is treated as this badass girl boss moment, with some upbeat music kicking in. I don't think the show realizes what's being condoned with this. Woo, look at her, she just killed a guy, let's go! At least it realistically portrays Echo getting her ass handed to her by Daredevil. Still, somehow all of this impresses Fat Dom.
None of my men have ever held their own with him like that.
So I guess we're just gonna completely forget about Bullseye then. That guy also put the hurt on Matt. Also, let's not forget the only reason she walked away is because Matt left for no reason. So really, it isn't all that impressive, is it? Kingpin has had plenty of other goons who have done far better than Echo and still got defeated. If anything, her performance is less than average. Like probably a D at best. Still, somehow she has Fat Dom's trust because family, and becomes one of his top lieutenants while they search for Ronin. We get another scene that I assume is from Hawkeye, which is a little confusing without context, but basically Echo realizes that Kingpin is a bad guy and shoots him point blank in the face. We then flash forward 5 months later and start the actual story of the show. That's right, everything we've covered so far was basically a previously on segment. We're 30 minutes into the first episode, by the way. I feel like a lot of this would have been better incorporated into flashbacks throughout the show to make the pacing not bad. So, Echo arrives in Oklahoma and stops at a gas station, revealing that she has an open wound. When did she get this? How long has she been bleeding? From what I've heard from people who've seen Hawkeye, she didn't get injured there, so where did this come from? There's dried blood running down her motorcycle, which indicates that she's been bleeding for a while. So how is she not dead yet? Well, Echo decides to put on some Walgreens bandages and leave the gas station. What exactly was the point of this scene? She stops at a gas station, goes, yep, still bleeding, and leaves. What is the pertinent information that needs to be communicated to the audience now instead of at our final location? It would be much better to introduce Echo as she stops at a gas station for some food right before she reaches her hometown and get attacked by some overly eager goon looking to take advantage of the bounty on her, which would introduce said bounty, which kind of plays an important role later in the story. Maybe this injury would force her to return home since it's the closest safe location nearby, which would make more sense for her character considering some of the stuff the show tries to tell us about Maya. She starts to die on the highway but is woken up by someone laying on the horn. First of all, how in the world does she hear this? She is deaf. Allegedly. Second of all, this is just one of my least favorite recurring tropes in media. The whole character being snapped out of something by some rando honking for no reason thing. I swear it's a thing, I just can't find any reference clips because my brain is decaying as I watch this show. The only reason they do is because they read the script and were like, oh shoot, this guy's about to fall asleep. I should wake them up. This scene is that trope at its worst. First of all, who in the world honked? The 18-wheeler? Why would they honk? Echo is right up against this guy's bumper, and if you know anything about 18-wheelers, it is impossible for the driver to see Echo. The same goes for the oncoming car. If she was that close to the trailer, that guy in no way could see her. Plus, he would have no reason to honk since she isn't drifting into his lane. If we wanted this to go as logically as it could have, Echo would have passed out from the blood loss and just accelerated into the 18-wheeler and died with the driver not even noticing. That at the very least would mercifully end the show. But if we wanted to keep Echo alive for a bit, we could just have her drift into the oncoming traffic and get woken up by headlights. It would be that simple. Unfortunately for me though, Echo makes it home safely and manages to patch herself up before passing out in a dream about mud people from the beginning of the show. She's woken up later by her cousin Biscuits breaking into her childhood home. If you're wondering why he wasn't invited to the family campfire night or just was never mentioned by his loving family, me too. He seems to have a great affinity for his cousin, but as far as I can tell, they barely interacted as children before Echo had to go off to New York. But don't worry, Biscuits is here now to make up for lost time. He's what I call a goober male. The definition of a goober male is a man who only exists to be a bumbling idiot. He's not a serious character and no one, including the writers, takes him seriously. He also just has a stupidly generic name, so I'm just gonna call him various quick breads and pastries for the remainder of this video. Echo tells Buns to keep her arrival secret and leaves before we learn anything more about this guy. He has a dog. I like dogs. Billy Jack seems like a good boy. I guess we'll move on now. Echo goes and spies on her estranged other cousin Bonnie as she plays basketball with her firefighter buddies. This, I guess, is to imply that Echo still really cares about her cousin, which is kind of funny considering what's about to be revealed. Her next stop is the local roller rink to meet its owner, Black Crow. Dude, you guys are speaking sign language. I'm pretty sure anywhere you talk is going to be private, but sure, why not? Apparently he's aware of Echo's illegal activities and he brings in the local mortician to finish stitching up her wound. It's revealed later that he used to work for Fat Dom, so it would make sense that he would have some idea of what Echo is up to in New York, unlike other characters. But you would think that an uncle working for the same boss, one who considered you family, would have been mentioned in any of the flashbacks, but it isn't. Okay, so he's actually mentioned one time by Papa Echo saying that the Black Crow got him a job with Fat Dom in New York, which will make some things later a little awkward. Now, I've tried to ignore this for long enough, but I'm gonna have to bring it up now. The pacing of the dialogue is so freaking slow, especially with this guy. I get that Echo is deaf, so sign language is necessary for communication, but in this show, the way it's executed drags every conversation to a crawl. The reason I bring it up now is because Black Crow is a good example of how to do this right and wrong. In the scene where the mortician is suturing Echo, Black Crow doesn't verbally speak unless it's to translate what Echo is signing to the mortician. Other than that, it's just silent communication. It flows well with Black Crow signing quickly to Echo and Echo signing back. Then in every other scene this man is in the first episode, he's talking as he signs, which drags the pacing of his conversations down to a snail's pace. He acts as if he was told what signs to do right before the camera rolled. I'm fine with that type of thing if it fits the character, like Papa Echo. We'll come to find out later that he married into the family, so his slower signing is a sign that he is attempting to build a relationship with his new granddaughter. However, if you're super familiar with ASL, then it shouldn't be that hard for you to speak normally while signing if that's what you want to do. Or better yet, don't talk as you sign. I do see the use of mouthing the words that you're signing to ensure that nothing gets lost in translation, which I have done and seen before myself, but you can still do this in a conversational pace. Of course, that assumes the deaf person can read lips, which Echo obviously cannot. Anyway, there's the skate rink employee who sees her and he discreetly texts an unknown number asking about a bounty that's out on Echo. Dude, just text like a normal person. It would look less suspicious. You look like a criminal here. Plus, it's a little convenient that there happens to be a guy working at the roller rink who knows about the bounty on Echo's head. Based on what we find out about Black Crow later, maybe Kingpin posted this guy here to keep an eye on him, but then Black Crow should be aware of this and made sure he wasn't up to anything. Black Crow actually implies that the kid is an old criminal collaborator, so he should be very aware of the potential danger he poses, but alas, he does nothing about him. Plus, the other thing is, why isn't Kingpin here already? He knew Papa Echo, he knows Echo, so naturally he would know where they grew up and came from, so why isn't he already here searching for Echo if he has a bounty out on her? This would be the first place to look for her. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He still may be a little bedridden from, being shot in the face. Still, you would think he would have a trusted henchman posted here just in case she comes back home instead of relying on the word of some hillbilly millennial working at a dead-end minimum wage job. Anyway, Black Crow takes Echo to the top of a satellite tower to encourage her habit of spying on her cousin. He tells her to talk to Bonnie instead of hiding from her, but Echo doubles down on her business. Apparently there's a shipping depot owned by Fisk in town that she wants to rob. That shipping depot is also coincidentally being run by Black Crow. So apparently she wants her uncle to aid in her plan of overthrowing Fisk as the kingpin of crime. Mind you, Echo thinks that Fat Dom is currently dead, so what, does she think she's going up against a zombie? Or hell, maybe she knows she's in a Disney product.
No one's ever really gone.
Black Crow intelligently and correctly says no one leaves. Already, I'm despising this main character. Echo is a hardened, seemingly unrepentant character, and the show tries to indicate that she does care for her family. However, if she really did, she wouldn't have brought her personal gang war back home. Fisk owns a bunch of businesses around America, specifically in New York City. I don't understand why this broad needlessly decided to put the lives of her family on the line for a criminal empire if she truly loves them. Now, this could be the decent start for a character arc where she turns her life around and becomes a better person, but that ain't gonna happen now, is it? Now, you might be wondering why I continue to speak about Kingpin as if he were still alive, and as I'm reading the script, I realized I spoiled that in an offhand comment, so, yeah, no, he's still alive. The man somehow survived a point-blank gunshot to the face. That is not possible.
That is impossible. And yet it has happened.
Okay, actually, there's a slight possibility. In order to survive a gunshot to the head, you have to be extraordinarily lucky. The skull is very tough, and our brains are capable of insane self-repair. Yet to survive a headshot, you have to have the perfect conditions. A type of bullet that will cause minimal damage, a good trajectory that allows for a clean passage through non-vital areas of the brain, a shallow depth of penetration, etc., etc. I have found a few accounts of people surviving shots to the head, but they all had to face serious hardships to recover. Weeks of physical therapy, reconstructive surgery, memory loss of the events leading up to the headshot, relearning fundamental skills, worse communication, sometimes even going into a coma for a bit. The Kingpin over here seems to be doing pretty good for himself, only a few days after being shot point blank in the face, assuming Echo immediately left for Oklahoma after attempted murder. And mind you, he was shot through the eye. There is no skull protecting him or even slowing down that bullet. I mean, technically, based on this angle, he got a bullet straight through the mouth, but I guess I'm gonna let that one slide this time. Still, it amazes me he's still alive with what looks like minimal complications. But hey, maybe they'll show more consequences than just an eye patch in the coming episodes. What am I talking about? This is Marvel, of course there isn't. Now, on the whole, this pilot is... well, it's pretty bad. It's sloppy and slow-paced with very little forward momentum in the story, mostly because it spends over half of its runtime on flashbacks and backstories that would have been best reserved for being sprinkled throughout the season as they become relevant. However, there are the seeds for a potentially good story. Echo comes back home to recklessly start a gang war, learns about how her actions affect the people she loves, and has to work to correct her mistakes and save her family. All while the phantom of her past looms over her head, tempting her to return to her criminal ways. Honestly, it could make for a good redemption story.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
Episode 2 starts off with another ancestor flashback, this time to a game of stickball, an early form of lacrosse. Interestingly enough, lacrosse originated with Native American tribes and was later adapted by Jesuit missionary priests in Montreal into a more common and far less violent sport. The Choctaw version of the sport was called Ishtaboli or Capuchetoli, which means little brother of war. Traditionally, these were massive affairs with anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people participating in these massive games. There were no out-of-bounds lines, and any other rules would be established the day before. You'd have these goal sticks with 3 points marks on it. One at chest level for 1 point, one just out of arm's reach for 2 points, and then an inscribed animal figure at the tippy top for 3. These games would be played for various reasons, mainly to settle intertribal disputes acting like low-stakes wars, but also to toughen young warriors for combat, for recreation, as part of festivals, and for the bets involved. Even back in the pre-European era, they were pioneering gambling. Warriors were the only ones who played, with the medicine men keeping score and the women basically cheerleading. However, if they really wanted to play, there was a woman's version of the game. Yeah, so that makes this scene a little awkward, doesn't it? This game of stickball is being played in Alabama, which means our Choctaws are the away team. Their star player is a girl boss, dominating the game like a Indian... Taylor Cummings, an Indian Taylor Cummings. This forces the home team to field their best player. I'm not entirely sure why they waited to put this guy in the game if he's that good. He also seems to be the only guy on the bench, so what kind of strategy are they orchestrating here? Maybe there are bets involved in this game and he could just ruin them by being too good. This Giga Chad warrior dominates the game, roughing up our Indian Taylor Cummings every chance he gets. Ain't no way she's holding off 2 fully grown men. However, in a bid to take the ball from him, Indian Taylor Cummings suddenly experiences visions of Mud Lady from the first episode and gains super agility or something to score the winning point. Again, what is happening here isn't clearly portrayed. It looks like Mud Lady just appeared and gave her an adrenaline boost. Even the way this is shot and edited makes what this girl is doing incredibly hard to discern. If this is supposed to be some supernatural achievement that blows the minds of those present, I would like to actually see what she's doing. As is, it just looks like a normal stickball maneuver. But obviously this is teasing Echo's superpowers, which we'll address when we get to them. For now, Echo sends Hush Puppies to Grandpa Echo's pawn shop to collect some military-grade gear like handsaws, lipstick cameras, and, as we'll find out later, components for a homemade bomb. How does Grandpa Echo have this stuff? I'd be surprised to find this kind of crap at an army surplus store, much less some random pawn shop in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma. Does Tomaha just have a population of retired Native American domestic terrorists that I don't know about? I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out the legendary Graham Greene. I'll talk more about his performance and how his character is used when we finish the show, but for now, he is the first actor who seems to be surpassing the limits of the script and the directing. In this one scene where he capitalizes on these folks' ignorance of Native American culture in order to sell some of his stuff, Mr. Greene makes his character the first one I feel endeared to. Honestly, I feel like I'm doing him a disservice by just referring to him as Grandpa Echo, so I'll just call him by his actual name. Plus, I'm always just a little tickled by natives making spiritual, liberal white folks uncomfortable just to mess with them.
I give thanks for this burrito that I'm about to consume. You fought the good fight to be where you are today, here on this plate. May your spirit be free as I eat your delicious body. Rest now and join your brothers and sisters in the next life. Aho.
Bannox has procured the dangerous weaponry he needed to get and returns to home base, except not for long because Echo has made some plans for the two to go out. Meanwhile, Grandma Echo plans an upcoming powwow festival with a couple of stragglers from Reservation Dogs. Their conversation reveals to us, the audience, that Granny Echo used to be a knitter.
He's a knitter!
But now she isn't anymore, though it's a little clunky since I would think that her fellow planners would be well aware that her knitting days were behind her long before it was time to plan the layout of the powwow. William Knifeman over here casually alerts Granny Echo to the fact that her psychopathic granddaughter is in town. So it seems like information spreads quickly in this town, since I don't see how William Knifeman could have seen and recognized Maya in the 2 days she's been back unless he really is his character from Reservation Dogs. Black Crow confirms it in a bit that she hasn't been home since Papa Echo whisked her off to the magical world of New York City, so it seems safe to say that somehow word has gotten around about Echo's presence, which would then bring into question yet again how Kingpin or his goons haven't shown up to look for her already. Speaking of that scene with Black Crow, Granny Echo shows up at his skate rink to confirm Knife Man's information. She tells him to get Echo out of town quickly and without telling Bonnie, though seeing as how random citizens are hearing about her, it's about time she hears about this anyway. This scene is a little weird considering the fact that Granny Echo is quite adamant about kicking both Papa Echo and an adolescent Maya out of town for being gang affiliated, yet she's fine with Black Crow operating as a member of Kingpin's organization in Tomaha. Of course, they clearly have a strained relationship, but it's just a little strange that she's not more openly hostile towards him, pushing him for him to leave with Echo. Maybe she thinks the skating rink is for the greater good, I don't know. That night, Echo does the opposite of leaving town quietly. She pairs her phone with Pancakes so he can track her and then jumps off a bridge to enter the train level from Uncharted 2. She makes her way to a very inconspicuous train car with armed guards just chilling outside. This doesn't seem like the most practical thing to do. Would it not be safer for your armed guards and less conspicuous to have them inside the shipping container instead of trying to keep their footing outside on a fast-traveling choo-choo train? But then I guess Echo couldn't loudly sneak her way in without being noticed. She uses the pawn shop items to slip in, opening a crate and slip out. As she makes her way to the back of the train, she slips and gets her fake leg stuck in the train car latches. As she struggles to pry her leg free, she suddenly has visions of Girl Boss's past, which somehow give her the strength to push the train latch open and free her fake leg. This is where we get introduced to Echo's powers. She can echo back to her ancestors and gain their powers, or something like that. It's not 100% clear because all of her ancestors are just normal people, but that's what's being communicated here. Now, I'm fairly unfamiliar with Echo from the comics, apart from her weird appearance as the shoehorned love interest in Brian Michael Bendis' Moon Knight run. However, I do know that her power set is one similar to Taskmaster's. She can perfectly copy anyone's fight style after watching it just once, becoming an echo of her opponent. It's a pretty simple yet kinda cool power, but it seems like the writer did not think so. Apparently those powers are lame, so Echo's powers were changed to stealing the powers of her ancestors. There's a joke about colonization somewhere in there. That's an interesting creative choice to make, because this power set is totally not lame. I mean, I can see how the power can be useful in day-to-day life. Call back on a hunter to help with your aim, call back to a writer to develop your lexicon, call back to a baseball player to better your game. Absorbing the lifelong memories and skills of all your ancestors can make you a well-rounded person, but this is just retarded. Unless you had Nephilim or Odin himself in your lineage, Echo should not be able to just gain super strength from her family tree because, as they are presented, they are normal-ass human beings. If I wanted to be charitable, maybe, just maybe, Mud Lady gained some sort of powers from the mound water, which may be implied by her apparently saving the Choctaw Nation from the tunnels. Maybe this will get explored further in a later episode. For now, I don't see how this is going to be a helpful ability to have. What, is she going to call back to her ancestors and learn how to shoot a bow and arrow, grow corn, scalp people, contract smallpox and die? I guess that would be a preferable situation, so I could call it a day, but I guess we have to move on. Echo frees herself and gets to the caboose, sticking a hammer in the wheels to alert Muffins, who has been following her this whole time. Maya's phone has been disconnected after getting her fake leg crushed, so our favorite goober has been driving blind in the middle of the woods, which makes this sighting a little convenient, I suppose. Then again, he could have just followed the sound of the train since they are notoriously loud. An oncoming tunnel forces Echo to prematurely jump, slam into the truck's windshield, flipping over the back, but somehow hanging onto the tailgate and climbing back into the truck bed. Nope, that's impossible. Nope. She's dead. She's dead. It's impossible she's still alive.
That is impossible. And yet it has happened.
Will you slow?
No, she in fact did not steal anything. What she did do was rig the shipment, which was full of missile heads, to explode upon opening. Cool. Our hero just killed a multitude of people in order to become a crime lord. What a likable person. I just hope everyone who died in there were all pure evil thugs and none of them were just, I don't know, desperate young people in over their heads or just normal railroad employees. Black Crow receives a call about all this and heads down to work to sort all this out. He has a powwow with employee number 1 and employee number 2 who verify that the explosion had nothing to do with them. When he finds out which station blew up, Black Crow immediately knows that Echo is behind this. He tells his employees to keep their heads down and that he'll take the brunt of the consequences for them. What consequences? Don't worry, the show doesn't know either. These employees are never seen again, and Fisk Shipping Company is never mentioned after this. What could have been an entire season-long B-plot for a character who's not going to get much to do anyways is reduced down to this scene and quickly forgotten about. Black Crow reaches out to Echo to confirm his suspicions about her domestic terror activities. However, she ignores him because she's spending quality time with legendary actor Graham Greene. Mr. Greene works on replacing Echo's leg with a great value one while she poorly justifies her actions to her uncle. They hit me, I hit back? What does she mean by this? Woman, they did nothing to you. The Kingpin is the guy you have beef with, and right now you think that guy is dead. You've most likely never met any of these people in your life. They probably didn't have anything to do with anything that's actually happened to you, so I guess that just means you felt like killing these guys because you're a mass-murdering psychopath. Alright, I think I gave Graham, can I call him Graham? I'm gonna call him Graham, enough time to finish Echo's new leg. As she tests it out, Echo spots a statue of Mud Lady and feels strangely drawn to it. Legendary actor Graham Greene explains that Mud Lady was the first Choctaw who saved the Mud people from the tunnels. Okay, so I guess that explains a little bit more context to the first scene of the show. Apparently, Granny Echo was able to trace her lineage back to Mud Lady, the first Choctaw, so legendary actor Graham Greene advises Echo to go speak to her about it to get the full lore dump. But if Mud Lady was the first Choctaw, would that not mean that legendary actor Graham Greene is part of that lineage as well? Wouldn't that mean everyone of Choctaw blood would have access to this ancestral power? It's like saying every descendant of Adam the First Man gains superpowers, meaning that we would all just live in a world of superheroes, which would mean that these aren't necessarily powers but the status quo. Insert syndrome quote here. That would then mean that the Choctaw Nation would just be a supernatural people who just lived in America since its inception and the US government apparently never found out about it. Let's be honest, if they did know about this, the Trail of Tears would take spot number 2 for the worst things the US government has done to the Native American people. This would honestly fundamentally change the world of the MCU as we know it. I guess if the powers were actually any good. But no, I guess the powers are just restricted to one woman per generation. Meanwhile, Cupcakes takes the truck into the salvage yard to get it fixed. Granny Echo spots him on his way there, confirming to her that Echo is still in town and roping her cranially defunct grandson into her criminal antics. At the scrapyard, Cornbread realizes he can't quite afford the renovations, so he puts it out on the radio waves that his PS4 is for sale. Well, considering how the PS5 has been out for about 3.5 years, holy crap, it's been that long? I don't think anyone's gonna take you up on that one. Bonnie hears this announcement via her fire truck radio. I would think it's a little irresponsible for her radio to be tuned into civilian airwaves rather than, I don't know, emergency channels. But nevertheless, she proceeds to question Scones about why his truck is in the shop. Being the goober male he is, 2 tons, which could also work as a really good pun, now that I think about it, lets it slip that Echo is back in town.
I'm okay. Billy Jack's okay, Maya's okay, but the truck, it's, well... Maya?
Heaven forbid he uses any sort of tact. His mind is just a blank slate. Those gears ain't turning. Speaking of their cousin, what's she up to? Eating Pop-Tarts for breakfast. 2 tons indeed. Black Crow interrupts her very nutritious meal to berate her about bringing a war to their quiet little town. I will say, I appreciate that there are characters in the show who are actively calling Echo out on how awful of a person she is right now. I really hope that sticks. At the point of writing this, I haven't seen the rest of the show. Recording I have, it doesn't stick. Echo's only response to all this criticism is... There's already a war. Bitch, not out here. Maybe there's some sort of war happening in New York thanks to the power vacuum you left, but out here things seem to be pretty chill. Any danger your family's about to be in, or currently is in, is all completely your fault. You can't just shrug the blame off of this. Black Crow says as much and heads out, leaving Echo to angrily shoot her childhood swing set. Women, am I right? At least I think she's angry. That they're trying to tell me she's angry, but I can't really tell with their RBF. Anyway, as she shoots, she starts having flashes of her ancestors, including a black and white gunslinger, which leads us directly into episode 3. We open on another flashback to another one of Echo's ancestors. This time we are treated to a silent film, which I guess to Echo would just be a normal film. I'm gonna bookmark this complaint for later, but it really annoys me that they didn't commit to the silent film style. Yes, it's in a 4:3 aspect ratio and in black and white, but it's still shot like a normal modern movie. I don't know if you knew this, but they did not in fact have drones or even dollies back in the days of silent cinema. And for a good chunk of that era, they were barely capable of camera movement in general. This feels about as authentic as Echo's right leg. This pseudo-silent movie follows a young girl named Tuklo as she trains herself to be the best gunslinger in the West in order to join her father in being a light horseman. The light horsemen were the mounted police force of the 5 civilized tribes of the United States. Their origins, near as I can find, go back to 1797, in which the Cherokee Nation formed regulating companies to handle horse theft and property crimes. They would earn the name Light Horsemen, derived from a rather popular Revolutionary War major, Henry Lee III. Light Horse Harry earned that nickname due to how swift his cavalry was. His pioneering of guerrilla and maneuver warfare led him to many victories in Georgia and the Carolinas, becoming one of the most successful officers during the Revolution. The Cherokee police force adopted this name and expanded their authority to apprehending more serious criminals. The Treaty of Doak Stand in 1820 granted the Choctaw Nation $600 a year from the U.S. to follow suit. Their light horseman force began operations in 1824 and acquired their first chief, Peter Pitchlynn, the next year. However, after Indian removal, they would just report directly to the tribal chief. The force was given authority to arrest, try, and punish criminals as they saw fit. Some classic frontier justice right there. They operated until the early 20th century where, like their other tribal contemporaries, they would be dissolved. However, just last year, the Choctaw Nation actually renamed their police force back to the Light Horsemen, which is kind of neat timing, I suppose. You know, as long as they don't go all Punisher on their citizens again. Now, despite how fun it sounds to be a Light Horseman, Tuklo's dad forbids her from joining, saying this: "No, women are life givers, men are life takers." Is that what the kids nowadays call based? I think that might be a little based. Well, Tuklo doesn't think so and runs away to become a light horseman anyways. Or, I guess a light horse woman. Her father goes on a hunt for some criminals and finds their camp, but it's a trap. Tuklo's nearby and has the whole ancestral awakening thing, which makes her shoot guns gooder. Also, this awakening changes the aspect ratio for some reason. Personally, this would have been more impactful if they had committed to the silent film style in the first place, and maybe shifted to color and sound here to emphasize that change. It's like the show's too afraid to actually commit to style. Why did she need the awakening to save her father? We see that she's been training her marksmanship for a while now, so why can't she just be the Indian Annie Oakley? She doesn't seem to actually need any help in that regard. If anything, this awakening undermines her skills as an individual. Also, how in the world would ancestral powers actually help her shoot a gun better? Guns weren't around for the time of Mud Lady or even Native American Taylor Cummings, so how would their skills in any way aid her in this situation? Again, some explanation as to how these powers work would be useful here. Well, it seems like the show doesn't feel like answering my questions, since we are now back in the present. Granny Echo pays a visit to legendary actor Graham Greene's pawn shop, and for once, I'm actually going to compliment the show. Through the two's interactions, we can tell that they have divorced at some point in the past, from the way Granny Echo adamantly rejects legendary actor Graham Greene's playful flirting, doesn't let him sit directly next to her, or even the fact that she's meeting him at his place of business instead of at home to tell him the pertinent information that Echo is back in town, which he already knows. He urges his ex-wife to make amends with Echo, but she refuses.
You know, you two are exactly alike.
Oh, so Granny Echo was a cold-blooded murderer with no abilities to display any emotion or compassion for even her close family too? I don't think I'd want to meet these people in real life. Still, I'm 100% on her side in this. Sure, she could have prevented her beloved granddaughter from going off to New York as a wee lass, but now Echo is a cold-hearted psychopath with no redeeming values. She seems too far gone in my opinion, but I suppose we'll see. Fingers are still crossed for that redemption arc. Speaking of the devil, emphasis on that last word, Echo is still experiencing her Nam flashbacks, which allows her to be kidnapped. Ah yes, because if she wasn't having these flashbacks, then she totally would have heard these people sneaking up on her. Oh wait. She wakes up tied upside down to the disco ball in the middle of Black Crow's skate rink. She immediately falls down thanks to her fake leg. I think this is an indication of the capabilities of her captors. We'll just call them Bozo and his hoes, because as we're going to see, they're just straight up clown people. That is pretty much their only character trait. For example, they could have just tied Echo up normally and also taken her fake leg to prevent her from walking around on the off chance she frees herself from restraints. They share like half a brain cell between the three of them, which is honestly just boring from a characterization standpoint. See, a good writer would give each of these people different personalities and values that would allow clashes between them for Echo to take advantage of and beat them. Instead, she will be able to get the upper hand on them because they're all just stupid. Awesome. Apparently Zane, the guy Echo almost blew up in the last episode, is coming tonight to verify Bozo's intel, so he needs to hold Echo hostage for a bit until he arrives. Why doesn't he just send a picture of Echo to Zane to smooth this process along and ensure that he gets paid? Oh right, because he's stupid. He has also kidnapped Black Crow. Don't know when that happened. The last time we saw him, he was driving away from Echo's house. When and how did these bozos take him hostage? It feels like there's a scene missing here. I'm gonna bookmark that thought for later as well. Echo is taken to a back room and tied to some gym equipment since the disco ball idea obviously didn't work. Why not just tie her up in the main room with Black Crow so you can keep an eye on them both? Alright, because they're stupid. Apparently they want to hide her away and wait until they get paid to reveal that they have her. I can see this going really well. At around this time, Bonnie happens to show up to talk to Black Crow about Echo's return home. Since the front door is locked, she sneaks through the back entrance, which the Bozo crew has left unlocked for some reason. Come to think of it, why would these morons conduct such illegal activity on public property that they don't even own? Say it with me, class. Because they're stupid. No, you're supposed to say it with me. You know what? Let's just move on. Black Crow is freed in order to convince her to leave, but he tries to subtly communicate with her about what's really going on. You know, jerky hand movements look incredibly suspicious, my guy. Even these bozos should be able to tell that something is afoot. While we're here, he really only tells Bonnie to leave, which is what he's saying verbally anyways, so the whole ploy is pointless anyways. So obviously Bonnie gets kidnapped as well. She's locked up with Echo in the back room, and upon seeing her estranged cousin again, Echo looks. That's it, she looks. No emotion, no anything, just... Anyway, Echo easily breaks free from her restraints, don't know why she didn't do this sooner, and frees her cousin. After checking the conveniently angled window above the storeroom to make sure the Bozo's hoes are keeping themselves busy with menial labor, Echo starts working on a plan to escape. As she does, Bonnie berates her for disappearing and ghosting her family. All Echo has to say in defense is... Yep, Bonnie, I'm smelling the shite too. Meanwhile, in the lobby, Black Crow tries to negotiate with the lead Bozo, but Bozo ain't hearing it. Suddenly, we're whiplashed into the next scene where suddenly one of Bozo's hoes is ranting about hearing something in the storeroom. Once again, it feels like we're missing a scene here. We go from a completely normal conversation to the Bozos frantically trying to figure out what Echo is up to. There's no go-between, no transition, it just happens. Once they get inside, they find the two cousins tied up like they were. An argument ensues and one of the hoes smacks Bozo's phone out of his hand. Then Echo picks it up, causing them to panic now that their captive is free. They decide to deliberate in the corner on what to do, which gives the cousins enough time to talk. These people are so stupid, holy crap. But now we get to see Echo's grand plan. She needlessly punches her cousin in the face before kicking her into two of the Bozos. She tries to take care of the other one by throwing the phone at her, which somehow distracts the broad long enough for Echo to pull off the most awkwardly slow spin kick I've ever seen. I had heard that Alaqua Cox was pregnant during some of the shooting, and it is so obvious here. How is this broad the only person in Kingpin's organization to take on Daredevil and survive? It blows my mind. And yet, Echo's master plan apparently doesn't work, seeing how these three stooges are able to take Bonnie and lock Echo back in the storeroom. You did great, dumb cow. Well, anyway, Zane is now here. Maybe he can salvage something from this episode. Who am I kidding? Nothing's gonna get better.
See, I don't like being played with. Fakey.
Bozo demands his payment before turning over Echo, but anyone with a functioning brain cell can tell Zane ain't exactly planning to pay anybody. Meanwhile, the heavier lady in Bozo's bimbo troupe who was left behind to guard Echo watches some online content. Honestly, it's probably better than what I'm watching right now. Echo whips up an EMP gun or something and takes out the lights, interrupting her guard's YouTube time. The lady goes into the storeroom to see if Echo wants to watch the cinematic masterpiece that is the Boogie 2988 documentary, but our hero seems to be more of a DSP fan.
Banned. Gone. Forever.
Man, is she gonna be upset when she finds out that It's a Gundam got that thing cancelled.
Darkside Phil said that I am, and I quote, an ugly, what was it, ugly pervert? Yes, ugly pervert.
Are you an ugly pervert?
Well, yes, but you know.
And now I've dated this video. This is an Echo review. This was dated the moment I put pen to paper. Echo takes a picture of her presumed murder victim and sends it to Bozo, who is currently being interrogated by Zane for the location of his captive, while being simultaneously berated by the remaining member of his hillbilly harem for not getting that bag. Women, am I right? You're being threatened by a gangbanger and all she's concerned about is having cash in her pocket. I guess she hasn't heard of OnlyFans yet. Upon receiving Echo's text, the side hoe freaks out and runs away, leaving Bozo to get shot. Rip Bozo, I guess. By the way, that woman's never going to be seen again, she just vanishes into the ether. Echo puts on some heavy metal and shuts off the main lights, and part of Zane's gang takes Black Crow to the fuse box to turn them back on. However, Echo has it booby-trapped and slowly takes out each goon. And I mean slowly. This feels like the show is trying to recapture that scene from Daredevil Season 1, Episode 4, where Matt has to save Claire from a group of Russians by shutting off the lights and systematically taking down each armed thug one at a time. Except with this scene, there is actual tension being built because it is presented solely in the Russians' point of view. They are quickly picked off with panic building in the survivors until there's only one left who mistakenly tries to threaten Claire. It is effective in presenting a nicely suspenseful scene that also builds up the menace of the man in the mask, firmly establishing him as a serious threat for the Russians and Kingpin's organization. Again, go watch my last video for more thoughts on that. Echo tries to go with this method as well, except a lot of this is awkwardly slow. You expect me to believe that this tiny woman is able to knock this guy out by gently tapping his head against some flimsy plywood?
I don't think so.
Echo seems to recognize the ridiculousness of this as well and decides to reveal herself to the rest of Zane's gang, kicking a fully grown adult man through drywall.
That is impossible. And yet it has happened.
Yeah, alright, we get it already. So she has full-on super strength all the time then. Was this established in Hawkeye? Because I have a sneaking suspicion that it wasn't. Anyway, a lame fight ensues that's awkwardly edited, slowly executed, and nobody uses the guns they're armed with to just shoot the broad. Also, this tiny girl who is missing a leg somehow suplexes a guy into a pinball machine. Ain't no way that's possible. I'll give some props to the fight, however. It is important to consider the environment in which your characters are fighting on top of the characters themselves, and I like the fact that Echo occasionally takes advantage of some of the arcade machines to defeat some of her foes, specifically using the skee balls to make up for her lack of physical strength against a gaggle of fully grown guys. I wish the show did more of this. Zane finally realizes that he has a gun and uses it, not to shoot Echo, that would be too smart, but to threaten Bonnie, which I guess gets Echo to give up instantly, because Black Crow being held at gunpoint was no big deal to her. Now that he has everyone right where he wants them, Zane gets ready to... Oh, wait, hold on, getting a phone call. Huh, apparently whatever this is just got called off. Okay then, I guess this entire episode is just pointless then. Cool. After everything gets sorted out, Echo takes her cousin outside to get her to leave. She apologizes for punching her in the face, saying... It had to look real. Excuse me, but what had to look real? Punching your cousin in the face? Because you really did that. What is it? You make it sound like it was your grand plan to convince the retard squad that you and Bonnie were fighting to distract him. But the issue is that they were already distracted by their own stupidity, and kicking Bonnie in that moment was really the only effective thing you did. Personally, I think you just wanted to assault your cousin for no reason, because you're a terrible person and I hate you. Or was it her plan to allow Bonnie to be taken away? If so, why? That only put Bonnie in more danger and ultimately put her at the end of a crazy man's gun. She would have been much safer in the storeroom with you. I thought you cared about her. Also, this still wouldn't justify sucker punching her in the face, so my point still stands on that front. Echo finally gets Bonnie to leave and debriefs with Black Crow. Through some more awfully paced sign talking and basic cognitive skills, they figure out that Kingpin is in fact still alive and coming for them. Given that fact, I guess Black Crow's gonna give a little "I told you so" before reluctantly helping her out. No, I'm kidding, he just throws out all reservations he has about Echo and becomes a loyal sidekick. Back at her childhood home, Echo is visited by the legendary actor Graham Greene, who brings her her new fake leg with some ornament to put on it. You know, at a time when she's trying to keep a low profile, I don't think it's a smart idea to give her a flashy little ornament to put on her leg. That's gonna draw some attention. Oh look, she's smiling! I'm pretty sure that's the only time this happens in the show. Graham again urges Echo to make up with her grandmother, but Echo says no. Instead, she's going to go on a motorcycle ride to the local dive bar to spy on her cousin who is waiting to meet her there. However, Echo once again ghosts her and returns home. Speaking of ghosts, she's greeted by one. Holy crap, that man's huge. Either this set is really fake or this man is the tallest person I've ever seen. And I say that as someone who's 6'6". We flash back to 2008, where instead of seeing another one of Echo's ancestors, we see a little bit of Echo's childhood with Kingpin. She gets out of school and feels like getting a sweet treat, so she tries to get some ice cream. However, the ice cream man doesn't realize that she's deaf and pushes her to, quote, use her words in order to communicate with him. In his defense, she wasn't obviously deaf. All she does is point at the ice cream she wants and signs "want," which just looks like you're being rude to the uninitiated.
Give me that.
What?
Give me that.
Yeah, so I don't blame him for showing a teensy bit of attitude. It's nothing too cruel, but apparently Big Uncle Willie disagrees. Really? Was this necessary? I know this scene is trying to establish how much Willie cares for Echo, but I don't think this is in character for him. From what we understand about him when he's introduced in Daredevil, Wilson is a calculating man who only kills when necessary to fulfill his plans. He feels regret whenever the person he kills is an innocent, such as Mrs. Cardenas. The only time he lashes out emotionally, such as what he does with the ice cream man, is with Anatoly, who interrupts his dinner with the woman he loves. However, this wasn't just Wilson being pissed that his nice dinner was ruined. Anatoly jeopardized Wilson's budding romance with Vanessa by bringing the criminal elements into his personal life. Wilson is a man who values his privacy, which just got breached here. And because the criminal life got introduced prematurely to Vanessa, she becomes weary of her new quarter. Those two reasons are what pushes Wilson over the edge, leading him to kill Anatoly. Plus, Wilson was able to use this to further his plan, at least in the short term. In another instance, he personally killed Ben Urich for interviewing his mother, which brought her into the criminal life, putting her in danger. Outside of that, he usually sends people to kill his targets, even Karen, who killed his best friend Wesley. He likes to add degrees of separation to keep his criminal and personal life apart, and it reinforces his anonymity. Yet here, Big Uncle Willie is just mad that some ice cream man has customer service skills that fall short of Chick-fil-A standards. I don't buy that this is enough to set off Kingpin's anger, especially to the point of trying to kill the man himself. After getting beaten within an inch of his life, the ice cream man is entered into a round with Baby Echo. So now we're painting our hero as a vindictive, violent person from a young age. Zoinks, that's not a great look. Willie is proud of her for being a violent person, which also seems a little out of character for him, since back then he defined himself by not being a brutal monster like his father. But whatever, we'll move on. Later in Echo's life, Kingpin officially inducts her as an independent member of his organization, and then to celebrate, he has her ASL translator murdered. Sure, why not? Don't you still need her? How are you going to talk to Echo for the rest of this dinner? This is just a stupid move, and once again, this isn't in Wilson's character to murder someone for no reason. Honestly, I'm pretty comfortable with saying that Wilson Fisk has been effectively assassinated at this point and has been replaced by Big Uncle Willie. You may be saying that this is a different continuity than the Netflix show, but first, no it isn't. But just in case Marvel changes its mind again and decanonizes the Netflix stuff, this is still Wilson Fisk with Vincent D'Onofrio's face. If this is supposed to be a different Kingpin, use a different face or else he'll be considered the same guy. Back in the present, Willie has figured out a workaround for a dead ASL translator. He didn't do the normal thing of actually learning how to speak ASL, he had a contact lens developed that translates spoken word to ASL, because that's the smart option. Willie is here for a family dinner. He explains that he isn't mad that she attempted to end his life, and he has deluded himself into thinking that despite this, Echo still loves him and is happy to see him alive. Clearly he doesn't have functioning eyes. Sorry, that was insensitive of me. Anyway, Echo ain't hearing none of this and accuses him of being an irredeemable monster. Pot, meet kettle. The show then hopelessly tries to build some sort of tension as the dinner goes forward. Echo is stupidly left alone to handle the wine. Seriously, Willie, I know that you really like her or something, but this chick shot you in the face and still wants to kill you. Maybe pay a little bit of attention to her. She could easily poison the wine while you're wandering around the house. Or she could just pour the wine down the drain in spite.
They came highly recommended.
Okay, I admit that's a little bit of a neat callback.
I don't know much about wine. My assistant, he recommended it.
Uh-oh, Willie just dropped the knife. But don't worry, he gives it to Echo as a sign of trust, I guess. Can't you just feel the tension in the air? Finally, after this stupid cat and mouse game is done, Willie reveals the reason he's here. He wants Echo to return to New York with him to rule his criminal empire. So right now he's offering exactly what she set out to do at the beginning of the season. Great, so that means she could just accept the deal and the show's over. No, of course not.
Don't give me hope.
Willie gives Echo some time to consider his offer before he flies back to the Big Apple. In the meantime, he'll be waiting at the local casino. Because of course he is. Hey, I mean, we gotta celebrate everything about Native American culture, don't we? The next day, Echo relays these recent developments to Black Crow. Black Crow is concerned with this development as well, since he too used to work for Willie in New York, but moved back to Oklahoma to stay a safe distance away from the big guy, which Echo is still clearly upset about, seeing as how he left her behind. I'm also starting to realize that there was some serious nepotism within this criminal empire. At around this time, Echo experiences a serious case of Nam flashbacks that coincides with a similar case that Grandma Echo is currently experiencing as she sets up the powwow. This time around, the case is so serious that Black Crow has to bring Echo to her grandmother, forcing an unwanted confrontation. Grandma Echo at least tries to be hospitable, but her granddaughter is an insufferable see you next Tuesday, demanding an explanation as to what's going on with the visions. Bold of you to assume that she does. Well, apparently she knows, so she's forced to explain the lore behind them. When she was about to give birth to Mama Echo, she experienced complications and was taken to a Midwood midwife to fix these issues.
Took me out of the White Hospital.
Yeah, all my homies hate them white hospitals with their modern medicine and being able to help with birthing complications. See, she says this, and it's just part of her culture, but I say this, and I'm called an anti-vaxxer who wants to kill my neighbors. Which might be true, but that's besides the point. Anyway, as she struggled with the birthing process, Grandma Echo experienced visions of her ancestors who gave her the powers to blast a baby out of her bajingo.
They had an ability to know when they were truly needed.
Ah, so they're Deus Ex Machina BS machines. Got it. Grandma Echo goes on to explain that this difficult process, as well as the help from the ancestors, created an unnaturally strong spiritual bond between her and Mama Echo that absolutely destroyed her when Mama Echo died. This would explain why she not only allowed Echo to go to Gangland, New York, but also has been fairly distant and cold to her as an adult. This upsets Echo. Oh wow, actual emotion. I'm not used to this from her.
And it's gone.
Still, Echo goes a step further and accuses her grandmother of disowning her. However, Grandma Echo clarifies that it was Papa Echo whom she disowned due to him being a heartless criminal, which, in my personal opinion, is a pretty decent reason for disowning someone. But maybe that's just me. I know Echo disagrees, seeing as how she storms off in a huff, leaving Grandma Echo behind to make a costume, as an unnecessary montage plays to remind you that certain characters still exist within this show. See, there's Bonnie, she's sad. And then there's Sopapias looking for car parts to repair Grandma Echo's truck. His buddy quotes The Lion King, which reminds me of the times when Disney consistently put out quality content. Meanwhile, Echo pays a visit to the local casino.
I suspect you've come to kill me. Again.
Nah, really? Tell me, Scooby-Doo, what clued you into that? Was it, I don't know, the gun that's currently being pointed at your face? But I suppose Echo's bloodlust isn't that strong, as she allows Willie to start up a conversation. He claims that he always saw Echo as his daughter, to which Echo pretty heartily refutes by pointing out that he never even bothered to attempt to learn sign language. Besides that one instance in a flashback that shows him signing I love you, and this other one where he signs family. So maybe the show's lying to me and Willie actually did learn ASL. So, thanks for making me feel gaslit, show. Echo also adds that Willie is a monster, to which Willie claps back with,
You knew what you were part of. At every turn, all the people you killed for me. Did you plead for their lives? I ask you, who's the monster?
Honestly, can't say he's wrong there. You did put your entire family's lives at risk for the sake of your own selfish ambition with no remorse. That sounds like something a monster would do. Willie brings Exhibit 1 into the argument, the hammer he used to kill his father. He recites his origin story, explaining that killing Bill granted himself freedom to be his own person, which isn't exactly accurate to the reason he actually did it in Daredevil. He told Vanessa that he did it as a tacit rejection of the monster his father was and a determination to never be like him. In a way, it gave him the freedom to be his own person, however, it is an action defined solely by Wilson's relationship with his father. He wasn't intentionally trying to free himself. He was trying to prevent himself from becoming his father. But I'm willing to grant that this is a manipulation ploy. He gives Echo the hammer, telling her to free herself the same way he did. However, she can't bring herself to do this. Oh, now you have reservations about murdering someone in cold blood. I see. Let's not forget that she already attempted to kill Willie before, and I haven't really seen any character growth that would cause her to pause this time around, so I guess this counts as a character inconsistency. Remember, her stated goal at the beginning of the season was to take over Willie's criminal organization and become the Queenpin. She hasn't changed her goals since then, and now has the opportunity to achieve them. Killing Big Uncle Willie for real this time would allow her to take over his organization and manipulate her way into an easy succession, but she rejects this promotion. Why? Going into the show, Echo is established to hate Willie for killing her father, so much so that she's willing to kill him. Now her relationship is presented as a much more complicated one, something that hasn't actually been illustrated. She tries to kill him, he shows up again, and she clearly still hates him, yet she does nothing to correct her past failures. If the first 3 episodes spent some time with Echo feeling conflicted about her murdering her uncle, this payoff would feel more natural. But this just seems like a random action taken in order to move the plot forward. Still, all of this doesn't convince Echo to get on the plane the next day. She thinks about her family a lot and ghosts Willie, opting to flee from town instead of joining him. Willie doesn't like that. Our series finale opens on a really poorly done CGI woodpecker, who's been a recurring bit of imagery throughout the show from what I remember. I pointed him out a couple times, but I'm not about to subject myself to this show again so I can say for sure how many times this motherpecker shows up. But it turns out he may not show up at all since baby Echo knocks his socks off with a rock. She takes the dying bird to her mother, claiming that it just fell out of a tree and needs help. I'd like to issue an apology to Grandma Echo. I thought she could have saved this poor girl from her fate of being an unrepentant murderer, but it seems like Echo has been doing this since the womb. She might legit be an omen child. Mama Echo obviously calls her out for the lie, so Echo gives her the most rational explanation she can think of. Yeah, this is some psychopath behavior. Mama Echo has to remind her daughter that pointlessly hurting animals is a bad thing, but this animal in particular is a special one. The Choctaw called them the Biskinik, but us Americans call them the yellow-bellied sapsucker. Oh, thank goodness I can finally talk about something other than this show again. Yellow-bellied sapsuckers are a species of woodpecker named for their yellowish bellies and the fact that they suck sap, which sounds like an insult, but I swear it isn't. There are 2 types of holes that the yellow bellies drill, smaller circular ones that drill deep into the tree so the bird can probe for that sweet sap and maybe some bugs as well, and the shallower, more rectangular ones that are high maintenance to keep the sap flowing. The round holes are usually drilled in rows across the tree. These sap wells will often be used by other animals like hummingbirds, bats, and porcupines. Their drilling is also used to claim their territory by taking advantage of man-made items in its area. They are actually the only woodpecker species in eastern North America that is completely migratory, flying as far north as Canada for breeding season and flying as far south as Panama during the winter. Despite only spending around a quarter of the year in Choctaw territory, these birds have become a sizable part of their culture. The Biskinik was one of 2 birds to escape the Great Flood that I referenced much earlier in the video and became known as the news bird. Naturally, the Choctaw Nation appropriated the name for its monthly newspaper. As explained by Mama Echo, these birds would warn the tribe when intruders were approaching by tapping messages out on trees. Mama Echo then uses her ancestral powers to heal the sapsucker's injuries, and he flies away. Okay, how in the world does this woman just have the ability to heal stuff? Who did she get this from? The more they introduce about these powers, the more I think that they're just a lazy BS writing device. Back in the present, Grandma Echo visits legendary actor Graham Greene's pawn shop again to see if he has her old sewing machine, which he does. Again, a nice little bit of characterization there showing that he still loves Grandma Echo. The only payment he requires is regular visits to the shop so that they can catch up. Well, that's nice. Maybe they'll become a couple again and he'll rejoin the family. Too bad we'll never know. This is the last time we see legendary actor Graham Greene in the show. There's even going to be a family gathering at the end of the episode, and Graham Greene won't get invited. Screw him, I guess. Grandma Echo takes the sewing machine away, presumably to reopen her powwow clothing stand. I say presumably because she's kidnapped at the post office by Big Uncle Willie after this asshole kid knocks all of her letters out of her hands without staying behind to help her. Seriously, screw that kid. Later, the powwow is about to get underway. Zane shows up and acts as suspiciously as possible by insulting local customs and ignoring basic parking instructions. I mean, even Shortcakes over here can tell something isn't right. If this was an actually competent criminal organization like, I don't know, Kingpin's gang in Daredevil Season 1, this man would have actually tried to be inconspicuous to ensure that this whole operation goes smoothly. Instead, he needlessly made the locals suspicious. Unfortunately, one of those locals is the cousin of notorious assassin Echo, which I guess could be a plan to lure her out? We'll get to the confusing plan later, but for now I'll just get to Echo herself. She has stopped at what I think is the same gas station she pointlessly stopped at in episode 1, dumps her translation contact lens, which could have been a useful thing to keep around since she can't read lips, and she grabs some lunch. As she eats, she spots a sapsucker who harbingers a text from Puftaloons, who reports a strange white guy, and more importantly that Grandma Echo and Bonnie have vanished. So I guess Bonnie was also kidnapped by Big Willie, but off screen. It would have been interesting to actually see how that happened, but I've gotten used to things missing from the show, so let's just move on. Echo books it to her grandma's house, where she finds a hallucination of her mother. Mama Echo finally explains the full extent of Echo's powers. Her ancestors all live within her, and their gifts echo through her. Oh, that's why she's called that. Each one of the ancestors gives her their abilities. Native American Taylor Cummings has strategy. Indian Annie Oakley has cunning. Mud Lady has ferocity, and Mama Echo has love. Cool, but those just sound like personality traits. How does this grant super strength, expert gunslinging abilities, and super healing powers? Also, wouldn't strategy and cunning basically do the same thing? The best strategies require a certain level of cunning to plan and execute. They're not exactly the same and can serve different functions, but there is a similar execution to both gifts. It would be like making one pill to give me the resilience to go to the gym, and one pill to give me rock hard abs, and I take both. Like, yeah, they're two different things, but they effectively serve similar purposes. I'd also like to ask how exactly these characters have these gifts. Mama Echo shows love to the woodpecker, so that makes sense, but how about the others? When did Mud Lady demonstrate ferocity? While she was holding up a cave ceiling while simultaneously holding in a fart? That takes super strength, sure, and maybe some good endurance, but ferocity? I don't know. When does Indian Annie Oakley demonstrate cunning? I mean, she can shoot well, but she doesn't necessarily use any deception or resourcefulness to defeat the outlaws. She just shoots them. If anything, she would be the one to have resilience. And then Indian Taylor Cummings doesn't execute any strategy to win her stickball game. She just randomly gains super agility. That's not strategy, that's cheating. These powers are incredibly vague and not even all that accurate. I feel more confused about them than when I started this. Anyway, Mama Echo has one final command to her daughter: to stay and fight for her family rather than run away, which is what she was already doing anyway. Was this a thing for her? When she's introduced, all Echo wanted to do was become the next Queenpin, but now this climactic scene for her character actually reveals that this whole time she was just trying to keep her family away from her criminal life. First, that's just inaccurate based on her actions. Bonnie is the only one she tries to distance herself from, and even then she puts her in needless danger. She refuses to visit her grandma out of spite, and then has no qualms with involving Black Crow, legendary actor Graham Greene, and donuts in her little crime war. Second, this isn't accurate just based on the premise of the show. If Echo's whole problem was that she ran away from her problems to try to keep her family safe, then why in the world would she come back to Oklahoma in the first place? Why did she not stay in New York or go overseas to run away from her problems there? This character makes no sense. Before Mama Echo allows her daughter to go, she encourages some light robbery. It's finally time for the powwow. Echo somehow sneaks in and blends into the crowd despite being noticeably taller than her peers and wearing a distinctly different costume. It also baffles me how no one here recognizes her. She's been the talk of the town since episode 2. You'd think that she would be treated like some local celebrity, which would alert Big Uncle Willie's goons to her location. The least she could have done is put on a culturally appropriate mask or something. As she half-heartedly dances in the little conga line, Echo spots the woodpecker landing on a nearby warehouse, which halfway pays off what was set up at the beginning of the episode. If you remember, Mama Echo explained that these birds serve as warning signals for the Choctaw. However, she had specifically said that the Biskinik communicate through tapping on the wood of trees, especially in cases of enemies infiltrating the tribe's domain. And this woodpecker ain't making any noise, so if anything, this should be an indication that Big Uncle Willie is not in the warehouse. If he was, then Woody over here would be raising a riot, alerting Echo to the fact that danger is afoot. Now, I know what you're gonna say, but Echo is deaf! Oh, then maybe let's not have an entire Chekhov's gun thing revolve around sound. Maybe give Echo a different Native American spirit guide to help lead her to Big Uncle Willie so that this actually makes sense. Or maybe just have Echo hallucinate her mom again who can point her in the right direction. Or maybe just have the woodpecker do the thing Mama Echo says it does when danger is near, even if Echo can't actually hear it. She still has eyes, she could see it. Plus, Echo isn't even Choctaw in the comics, she's a Cheyenne. You didn't have to go in this direction. You chose this nonsense. I know this may come off as a petty quibble in the grand scheme of things, but I think it's indicative of just how shoddily put together this show is. If you can't get the basic payoff to what you set up right, or even just consider the simple fact that your character is deaf, which ruins your payoff, then why should I believe the show as a whole is going to be any more coherent? Still, despite all that, the woodpecker is correct, since Big Uncle Willie happens to be waiting here in the warehouse for her. He reveals that he has indeed kidnapped Grandma Echo and Bonnie, the latter of whom is now translating for him. What happened to the cool little device you were using in the last episode? It would be useful to at least know for a fact what Echo is saying. Considering Bonnie is an ally of Echo, it is entirely possible that this woman could be lying to you while receiving discreet instructions about how to escape, assuming Echo is a competent tactician, as we've seen. So maybe you're not in any real danger here. I guess she didn't quite inherit that strategy thing, did she? Now, you could make the argument that Willie's earpiece was Bluetooth paired with Echo's eye contact, which would be a poor design choice in my opinion, but Willie would have no idea if Echo trashed the contact or not, so he should still be trying to use those devices for communication, right? Or at the very least, he'd have more than one model of these things. But heaven forbid the smart crime boss behave as such. Anyway, Willie still wants Echo to be in the family business, but Echo declares that she will not be the legacy of him or her father. Rather, she is the legacy of her family here in Oklahoma. Now that would be a nice moment if Echo was at all struggling with her identity or whose legacy she wanted to follow. Willie doesn't quite like this moment either, so he has his henchman punch Echo in the face, which unlocks her ancestor abilities. And she's somehow able to just give them to the other ladies in the room. Because why not? I mean, I could understand Grandma Echo gaining powers in this moment since she's a part of the Mud Lady lineage, but the show is quite clearly showing Echo bestowing upon her grandmother powers that she should presumably already have access to, which means that Grandma Echo couldn't use the powers herself until they were given to her by someone else. Woo, girl power! While all this is going down, Black Crow has arrived and receives a call from Bortsog, who reports strange honky behavior. Now, Zane has arrived a while ago, long enough for Echo to come all the way back into town. So why in the world did Empanadas wait so long to tell Black Crow? In his defense, he seems genuinely brain deficient, so I guess I could give him a pass. When Echo rejects Willie's offer for the final time, Willie somehow issues orders to just indiscriminately murder everybody at the powwow. Does it even need to be said how stupid and pointless this is? But luckily for the innocent people just trying to party, Kalachis shows up with a monster truck to kill them all. Woo! Also, if you're wondering where the monster truck came from, it's the very same truck that Pop-Tarts totaled during the train mission and started to revamp at the end of the last episode. So I guess he did have some sort of arc in the show. Zane decides to bust out the RPG to blow everyone away, but he and Black Crow spot each other. Instead of just slightly turning to shoot him, Zane stands there like an idiot and literally goes, "Wait, what?
Wait, what?
Wait, what?" Sounds so stupid. Before Black Crow lands a headshot. This could have been a solid little climactic moment for Black Crow if he was more of a character and if he and Zane shared more than one scene together. I don't even think Black Crow said a single thing to this guy. Back inside the warehouse, Willy tries to kill Echo, but she whips out her mom's healing jutsu, or whatever they call it in Naruto, forcing Willy to relive his childhood trauma, which, mind you, was something he largely moved past thanks to his wife Vanessa in Daredevil Season 1. But now it is Echo who is able to heal it, and she wins the day by making the big man cry. Great. I think I've lost the last bit of respect I had for the once great Kingpin. Willy's henchmen come in to save their boss, and instead of shooting their enemy when she's right there in front of them, they just leave. And Echo just lets them. I know you have apparently stopped being an angry serial murderer, but I think you still wouldn't want Willy to escape to come back again one day, right? I'm sure the Light Horsemen would be more than happy to jail the man who is about to commit what would be considered an anti-Indian hate crime, no? Huh? We're letting the villain go for no reason? Okay then. Great hero we got here, everybody. The show ends with a family dinner, sans legendary actor Graham Greene. And that's it. No conclusive dialogue, no reflection, just everybody eating food like everything is a-okay. I can't think of a better way to end the show. Oh, and there's a post-credit scene where Willy sees a news broadcast demanding for a new governor for New York who is an outsider, someone who knows the pain the citizens are going through, and Willy's like, "That's me!" So I guess he's about to enter his Trump arc. Look, I don't care. It's not like this is going to be revisited in the next 5 years. For all we know, this is the last time we're going to see the character. And that was Echo. I'm not gonna lie, it's terrible. Marvel really went off the reservation with this one. I don't know what peace pipe they were smoking at the powwow when planning this out, but somebody's getting scalped for making this piece of bison crap. Alright, I'll stop now. The more I worked on this video, the more frustrated I became with this show. I started seeing slivers of potential hidden between the terrible lines of dialogue, awkward acting, and absurd character decisions. Nothing quite exemplifies this wasted potential like our main character. I rag on Echo for being a horrible person, and don't get me wrong, she is, but there was potential in her arc. She's introduced as this remorseless hitwoman who has killed her boss and is setting out to replace him as the Queenpin. She then takes steps to achieve this goal, causing her entire family's lives to be threatened. Her uncle, grandmother, and cousin are kidnapped and put at gunpoint, the latter of whom is a 2x victim of this. Plus, she coerces her room temperature other cousin into a high-speed train chase, ruining her grandmother's car, and putting his and his dog's life in danger. Then her activities get herself, her uncle, and cousin kidnapped by a gaggle of goofballs. It is emphasized by characters like Black Crow and Grandma Echo that her plans will put her loved ones in harm's way, which I just cataloged, so it seems like the show is setting Echo up for an arc where she comes to understand that her selfish actions hurt those around her and transforms into a more selfless person who vows to fight for others. In the process, we could understand Echo's relationship with her father and Kingpin, which would allow her to become a more empathetic character. However, after Big Uncle Willy shows up, the show introduces this brand new struggle of Echo wrestling with whether she should join him or kill him. Realistically, both options work with her established motivations of being the new Queenpin, since killing her uncle would once again open his spot up as the leader of his criminal empire, and accepting his proposal would also see her gaining that same position. And yet she opts to reject both options and run away, which apparently has been Echo's big struggle all along, even though it has never been addressed. This is the very end of the penultimate episode, by the way. This is then reinforced by the Mama Echo vision. Yes, Echo's big struggle this whole time is that she runs away from trouble in order to protect the people she cares about the most, her family. However, that is completely contradictory to everything that happens in the show. In this exact moment, Echo running away only puts her family in more danger than they would have been originally, which she should know since she grew up with Willie in the first place. Let's not even mention the fact that Echo's mere presence in Oklahoma at the beginning of the show put her family in danger. And she even recruits them in her mission to take over Kingpin's empire. If she actually ran away from danger to protect her family, she wouldn't have even come back to Oklahoma in the first place, and this entire show wouldn't have happened. This new arc becomes the complete antithesis to what was established in the first 2 episodes. But alas, this new struggle is overcome as quickly as it's introduced, as Echo goes off to fight Willie for the final time, where we are introduced to yet another inner character struggle that only exists for this single scene. Echo apparently has been struggling with whether she is the legacy of her Uncle Willie and criminal father, or her superpowered ancestral line of strong women this whole time, though Willie wouldn't know it by looking at her. To be fair, it's hard to discern anything she's feeling by looking at her. Maybe simmering annoyance, like she's about to call my manager. This is another big issue with Echo as a character, her portrayal. She never shows emotion outside of like 2, maybe 3 shots in the whole show. Instead, Alako Cox attempts this constant stoicism that doesn't really communicate anything. A good stoic character is usually a dude, let's be honest, but more importantly, he is a character using stoicism for a greater purpose. They either hide their emotions for the sake of doing their jobs effectively, be a pillar of strength for those who need it, maintain a veneer of strength to keep power, etc., etc. Stoicism is a conscious tool of the character, but it can also be used by the writer to emphasize moments where a character's mask slips to reveal true heartache or anger. Echo's stoicism does nothing but emulate the stoicism of classic Clint Eastwood type heroes. She honestly just looks like she has RBF. This also clashes with the show's attempts to characterize Echo as an angry young woman lashing out at the world. Whether this is just a reflection of famous Amazon warehouse worker Alako Cox's inexperience or a deliberate decision by directors, this really depreciates the likability and pathos for Echo's character, which is already pretty non-existent in the first place. Echo is a stone-cold killer, an unrepentant criminal. She commits crimes, puts her family in danger, and then she's magically fixed by her ghost mom's sign language, which also apparently fixes her relationship with everyone in her family. She never has to confront the fact that she's done horrible things. She doesn't have to repent. There's no regret for what she's done. Things are just magically fixed, and she gets rewarded. I freaking hate that. The show presents 3 different Echoes with 3 different goals. One wants to take over Kingpin's organization, one is a wayward granddaughter who stays away from her family to protect them, and one struggles with figuring out what legacy she will carry. 2 of those Echoes could actually work together if introduced at the same time, or if at the very least both are properly developed. Echo at the beginning of the show continues the legacy of her father and surrogate uncle by trying to become the Queenpin. But in the end, she commits to the legacy of her ancestors and family in Oklahoma. That could work, especially since the villain represents one legacy while the supporting cast represents the other. Like her father said, she has to walk between 2 worlds, but she must choose one. The world she chose at first was the one she observed as a child. This is the world that shaped her. If more of the show focused on her relationship with Kingpin, I could even defend her assault of the Ice Cream Man as a continuation of this. She witnesses Kingpin attack him, so she copies him because she thinks it's the right thing to do. It's like that scene from the dojo where she learns to copy what she sees. Once she grows up and loses both of her parental figures, at least to her knowledge, then she's left to forge her own legacy, which brings her into conflict with her old family. Again, this opens the door for redemption. However, this is where the other goal muddles things. Introducing Echo's tendency to run away from trouble to protect her family not only completely contradicts Echo's former actions and motivations, but it also inadvertently lets Echo off the hook for all the bad things she's done. The show randomly gives her a more noble struggle that ignores what she has done previously, forcing the show to gaslight the audience that she is a much more morally good person than she actually is. Add to the fact that one of the primary characters calling her out suddenly does a 180 and that Echo never has to face the horrible things she's done, she becomes an incredibly unlikable and borderline despicable character. Getting rid of this one little thing could have improved her character immensely. It wouldn't have fixed everything, the writing still has to be good, but it's a start. Echo served as a vassal for the show's themes of familial reconciliation, which is pretty blatantly told to us by Biscuits in the junkyard.
Chola always says there's nothing too broke to fix. If you want it bad enough,
Don't throw it away.
One thing you can never accuse Biscuits of being is subtle. However, it is completely ruined when she doesn't have to face her horrible actions or even just apologize for them so that reconciliation can happen. Instead, it just happens without any effort on the part of our protagonist. At best, Echo is inconsistent, but at worst, she is truly despicable. However, it is the Kingpin's treatment in this show that angers me the most. He has a 3-season legacy that is basically destroyed here if you don't count Hawkeye, which I'm not because I didn't see it. The artist formerly known as the Kingpin has been reduced down to a niece simp who just randomly kills civilians for no good reason. He so desperately wants this random child to take over his crime organization that he's willing to overlook the fact that she shot him point blank in the face, even encouraging her to murder him. Why would he do this? That is an honest question I'm asking. Why would he do this? I really want to know why he's bending over backwards for a woman who really wants to kill him. I struggle to believe that he would be willing to go this far for even Vanessa. Yet here he is offering his very life up on a platter to this deaf amputee who has done nothing to really prove herself as a leader. Dude, what is wrong with you? And then when she rejects him, what, for like the 3rd time now, he finally takes the hint and decides to just commit a Choctaw genocide. Also, apparently he's still not over his daddy issues, even though that was something that was resolved back in season 1 of Daredevil thanks to the love of his life, and not some random child that he met. But now this random girl is able to fix all of his daddy issues with her sign language Native American hoodoo voodoo. Did I mention I hate Echo's powers? I don't think I ever explicitly stated it. I hate Echo's powers. You had a great character right there, and then you intentionally made him worse. I don't know if that takes exceptional talent or an exceptional lack of it, but it takes something to make a decision that absurd. This man is a husk of his former self. The only thing that brings me comfort for him is that I have 2 more seasons of Daredevil to talk about in the future, so I don't have to remember him like this. But hey, at least the rest of the cast fares better than him, but that's really only because most of them are non-existent as characters. Legendary actor Graham Greene is really the only character who has a likable personality, mostly thanks to his charismatic performance. He's also just a generally kind-hearted guy who, despite technically not even being part of the Lopez family, tries desperately to mend the bridges between the 2 feuding women. Now, that is a very respectable task to take on, jumping in between 2 angry women. It's honestly a shame that in the end all of his effort was in vain, since the 2 ladies were forced to talk to each other by Black Crow independently of him, and then he's left out at the big family reunion, leaving him to feel like a completely pointless character in the grand scope of what could generously be called this show's story. There was potential for him to be the glue that holds his surrogate family together and maybe play a sort of metaphorical foil to Kingpin, but the show wasted him. Grandma Echo, on the other hand, is a lot more important in her role. She is Echo's estranged grandmother who is also part of this superpowered lineage. I like that she's one of the few characters who actually treats Echo for the criminal she is, while never necessarily being portrayed as in the wrong. Her conversation with Echo also does a lot for her character. While attempting to shed some light as to how these vague ancestral powers work, Grandma Echo does reveal the reason she has kept her distance from her granddaughter. Because of the nature of her powers connecting her with her entire lineage, she developed a deeper bond with Mama Echo than the usual mother-daughter relationship. When Mama Echo died, it was like a piece of her was completely destroyed. This makes it understandable that she could never quite recover from that to try to make amends with Echo. It also doesn't hurt that Echo seems to have always been a stone-cold killer, but this makes Grandma Echo probably the only character to have more than one dimension. Too bad after this she just gets kidnapped and rescued by Echo. There's no scene that actually concludes her arc. We get a reason why she is who she is, and then there's no change or conclusion, which is pretty important for a character's story arc. She just hugs Echo like they made up and all's good in the world. There was potential for her to be the ultimate gatekeeper for the family that Echo has to work to win over, but the show throws that out the door. The bread boy is just a goober male who drives his grandma's truck. That's it. He accidentally finds out Echo is in town, destroys his grandma's truck during the train heist, accidentally lets the one person Echo wants to keep in the dark that Echo is in town, then disappears until it's time to bust out the murder monster truck. If you want an example of a goofy comedic relief character who's actually competent and contributes to the story in a meaningful way, both thematically and narratively, I would point you to Ringo from Blue Eye Samurai. He's also a bit of a goofy comic relief sidekick who is incredibly loyal to the main protagonist, Mizu. However, he also works as a character. The dude is a double amputee, suck it Echo, yet he still proves himself a capable cook and traveling companion. He helps Mizu through the travel gates and even saves her life. Despite being such a goofy guy, Ringo is willing to call Mizu out when she commits actions that violate his own convictions. He may be comic relief sometimes, but he's still a serious character, unlike a certain somebody. Biscuits could have been, but he wasn't. Black Crow is here, I guess. He was one of the few characters to call Echo out on her actions until he isn't, because a skating rink is more important than personal ethics, I suppose. We get a glimmer of his backstory in one single scene, which reveals that he ran away from New York, abandoning Echo. However, Echo's feelings around this are never really resolved, and Black Crow himself doesn't actually go through any meaningful character arc or do anything substantial besides chauffeuring Echo to her grandma's house and shooting the guy who destroyed his skate rink.
Wait, what?
The most interesting thing about his character is that he shares the same name as a Marvel superhero, though as far as I know, they have no relation past that. Mind you, my familiarity with the comic book Black Crow doesn't really extend past the Eye of the Puma storyline from Spectacular Spider-Man, so maybe the guy at some point owned a skating rink, though I doubt it. Rounding out the supporting cast, Bonnie is the epitome of a nothing character. She might as well be a fart in the wind. There are certain people online who like to complain about female characters, particularly in superhero or action movies, who are nothing more than damsels in distress. In most cases, these people are wrong, but Bonnie here is exactly what they think these other action love interests are. Well, except for the fact that she's Echo's cousin, not a love interest, but sometimes I have my doubts. I mean, Oklahoma's close enough to Alabama for this to be realistic, so take that for what you will. She's set up to be Echo's childhood best friend who tried to stay in contact over the years with no avail. Her finding out about Echo's return is treated as a big deal, but again, it amounts to nothing. All that happens with her is that she gets spied on by Echo, kidnapped by Bozo, gets ignored by Echo, and gets kidnapped again. Oh, and in both instances, she's completely redundant since the kidnappers already have another hostage. Bonnie could not be in this show, and I don't think anything would change. On the villain side of things, you got Bozo, who's a stupid redneck working a dead-end job. He only really serves to help Willie's crew find out that Echo is in Oklahoma, though they should already know about this, considering Willie knows that this is where Echo grew up. So really, this should have been the first place he looked for her. Anyway, this dude's stupid. That's all there is to him. Then he dies. Zane has somehow even less going for him. At first, he seemed like he could have had somewhat of a personality, and Andrew Howard tries something, but he ends up being nothing more than a glorified background goon with a really weird accent. I'm also just now realizing that the only white guys in this show are all bad guys imported from other non-Disney Plus MCU shows. I feel like they're trying to say something with that. No matter how bad a big budget project like this gets, I'm pretty sure I can usually compliment some of the smaller players working behind the scenes. Usually the costumes will look good, sometimes the effects can be reliably believable. Emphasis on sometimes. Whatever it is, the lighting, the editing, the cinematography, whatever, it has some sort of passion or borderline competency behind it. I don't think I can say that about Echo. Echo's final costume looks cheap and bland. There's some just really awkward CGI throughout. Not as bad as what I've seen from She-Hulk or other projects, but still pretty bad. Above all though, the editing here is atrocious. I get that some poor guy had to shrink an 8-episode show down to a 5-episode one, but there's some blatantly bad editing decisions throughout this show. It's like they put a bunch of retarded chimpanzees in the editing bay. Primarily, there's some weirdly jarring scene cuts, such as the one where Bozo is leaving a conversation with Black Crow to suddenly being mid-conversation about a noise that was never actually heard by the audience, or maybe the one where Echo leaves her house, sees Bonnie at a bar, and is suddenly back home at nighttime. Editing in a separate scene with other characters, or maybe just a crossfade, could make a passage of time feel a little more tangible. There's also a lot of shots that look like everyone is on a green screen soundstage, particularly at Echo's house, creating a really artificial looking world. Also, wasn't this supposed to be rated TVMA? What, because of like this one shot of a bloody face? I've seen more graphic violence at a Five Nights at Freddy's screening. There's also just some stylistic decisions that are poorly done. Most notably, the silent film bit with Indian Annie Oakley at the beginning of episode 3 is just bad. It wants to mimic silent films, but then it hits us with a drone shot. That immediately breaks any type of verisimilitude this scene could have had. It is a complete clash of styles that breaks any creativity being exercised here. This entire bit shot like a modern movie with a thin veil of a silent film draped over it. Another time the show tries to do something stylistically neat is the deaf vision thing, for lack of a better term. Occasionally, the sound will dip out so we can experience things from Echo's point of view, but it's like the editor is too afraid to have this last for more than like 10 seconds. The only instance it lasts a significant amount of time is in Echo's final confrontation with Big Uncle Willie, and honestly I think it would be more useful to hear what Willie's ranting about in that moment. It would have been more interesting to have segments where Echo is all alone, such as the train heist, just be completely in depth vision. It wouldn't have made the show a good one, but at the very least it would have been something unique and interesting to watch. You know, I could at the very least say, well, the writing was dog water, but the depth vision thing was kinda cool. Instead, it, much like most of the show, is half-assed and forgotten about for other such BS. It makes a lot of sense that Marvel would want to just trash this before being forced to condense the show and quietly dump it on their streaming services to get it over with. Echo is a shoddily stitched together nothing show that follows an unlikable and uninteresting protagonist whose motivations change faster than a Marvel project changes writers battling against a castrated version of a once great character. It feels too generous to call this a show. It's more like an assembly of scenes that just kinda happen. It could have been a solid redemption tale, but it failed to accomplish basic things that could have even made it competent. Truly, Echo is one of the worst shows I've ever seen, and I wish to not see another like it. For its part, Disney should be holding a powwow of its own and start taking the scalps of executives who are greenlighting these shows. Maybe they should pay attention to the smoke signals their former tribesmen are sending. But I believe that it's more likely they will continue to wound their own knee until they are forced to walk a trail of tears to bankruptcy and unemployment. If you want a good show with Native American characters, watch literally anything else. There's a recent Zorro show from Spain that was released in January with decent Native American characters, including an angry native lady who is a mass murderer yet is somehow more compelling than Echo. Reservation Dogs has like half the cast from this, so you can just go watch that. I thought Papa Echo was pretty good in Fargo Season 2. Honestly, you could just pick a random Taylor Sheridan project and you have like a 50-50 chance at picking one with good Native American characters in it. Hell, just watch some old Western serials. I'm sure they have some good Indian characters in them. Anything but this. I truly wish I did not know about Echo. I wish I could return to my hole of ignorance where I could never have known this existed. Instead, I came out of my hole to watch Echo, and I wish I could get my time back. But now I return to my place as a passive bystander in the realm of the MCU and continue my spiral down the fantasy anime rabbit hole I found myself in. I don't know why, but every show that I end up putting on while I've been making this video has ended up being yet another fantasy anime, and every single one of them is better than this. I think I'm transforming into a weeb. I may need some help. Somebody help me, please. But seriously, go watch Frieren. It easily outclasses anything coming out in the West today. Except maybe Shogun. That show is absolutely excellent. Although that's basically a Japanese show too, so I don't know. So just watch the One Piece live action show. That's pretty good. Oh no, wait, that's anime too. Dadgummit, I can't escape it! With all that being said, I'm officially tapping out of the MCU for good this time. Unless Echo somehow gets another season, which, judging by its viewing numbers, is incredibly unlikely.
So sorry for your loss.
There is absolutely no way I return to any new offerings from this franchise. Okay, maybe. I'm not making any promises. Unfortunately, the way things are trending, the once great MCU seems to be on its last leg. But if they continue to put out garbage like this, they'll eventually just become another echo of the past. Thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you liked the mini documentary education type stuff that I put in this video, let me know. I really enjoyed learning a lot about these topics and found it more entertaining than the show, so, you know, there's the plus side to that, I guess. And if any of it interested you, I included links down below for further reading. But yeah, next up is Jessica Jones. For real this time. Stay blessed. I'll see you next time.